it's getting warmer, but you've got to remember that Brisbane's coming off the bottom of a 10-year low, that in many suburbs in Brisbane, prices when you factor in inflation are still cheaper than they were 10 years ago. So it's not Sydney and Melbourne that have gone through this crazy boom in the last 7 to 10 years. And because of that, we're super excited. So if you are an investor looking at Brisbane, here's a few tips and tricks based on our experience. 2021 to 2025 are looking insane for the Brisbane property market. Now in today's video, Simon and myself wanted to give you a really good update on what's happening on the ground, as well as our experience from buying over $240 million worth of property in the Brisbane market in the last 5 years.
It's been such an awesome start to the year as well, talking to so many great people. It seems as though a lot of people have got their eyes on the Brisbane market at the moment, and once we get through this market update, I think a lot of other people will probably be looking toward it.
Now, some of the things that I'm liking in the data, and then we'll talk about some of the things we're noticing in the market every day as well, is the vacancy rates, which is an indicator of, you know, the rental demand in a city is going lower and lower according to SQM. Now, we completed a granny flat and rented out a house the other day, and we had over 48 groups through that property in Brisbane City within the first weekend.
It's insane. My 2 investment properties that I've got in Brisbane have just come to their lease renewal, and I've been able to increase that rent just slightly because of the demand in the market at the moment, which it's really good to see because it's been years since we've seen some rental increases.
You know, it was only 4 years ago that Brisbane was in oversupply like Sydney and Melbourne are from inner city units, and it's crazy how quickly that supply has been absorbed. Now, I sent an email to my property manager at the start of the year, like I do, just sort of talking about my plan for the year, and my plan is just to take advantage of market conditions and bump those rents up as far as I can.
Now, those vacancy rates is probably due to the amount of population growth that's coming into southeast Queensland right now, which the ABS come out and said that they think there's about 1,000 people per week moving into southeast Queensland at the moment.
When I first moved up to Queensland at the time, I think it was about 2006, there was 1,000 people per week moving into southeast Queensland, and it's taken almost 15 years to get back to the same point. Now that's super, super exciting as an investor, because more people equals more demand, equals better rent returns, equals more speculation on property prices longer term.
Yeah, those big ticket items that we're looking for is population growth, job growth, and the next one that we want to talk about, which is infrastructure growth. And it seems as though Brisbane, southeast Queensland is going through an insane infrastructure boom right now. Late last year, I was reading this massive update which outlined all of the different infrastructure projects that are going on, which is talking about major upgrades to the railway systems in both the south side of Brisbane, north side of Brisbane, major upgrades going on in the M1, the big major arterial roads. Just really, really cool to see. There's cranes all over the city.
We're seeing schools, hospitals, universities being built, and that's all good for jobs. Now, obviously 2020 was a hard year, but one of the things that the government's committed to do is what's called the COVID infrastructure bailout program. There's over $100 billion worth of money coming out and going into the Australian states, and Brisbane, southeast Queensland, Sunny Coast, Gold Coast are getting a huge chunk of that. On top of that, there's some of the biggest development projects in Australia right now. On the Sunshine Coast, there's 2 or 3 that are worth well over $1 billion. In the Gold Coast, they're expecting the current skyline to double over the next 7 years. There's the Southport CBD being built on the Gold Coast. There's the Maroochydore CBD being built on the Sunny Coast. Both of the airports have just been upgraded. The Brisbane airport's currently being upgraded. It is epic for jobs, and that is obviously the government's intention to re-stimulate the economy through getting people back to work.
And what I love about this as well is it really lines up well with what Phil Anderson has been talking about moving into this second half of the real estate cycle, where he says generally this is where you get massive infrastructure spending and also extremely low vacancy rates, and we're seeing both of those happen at the moment.
Yeah, now what historically happens if you look at long-term cycles is the big cities, your Sydneys, your Melbournes, your New Yorks, your LAs, your Londons, do really well after a GFC because they've got more diversified economies. Then they get bloody expensive and people start looking around for the next best thing, and people start looking at secondary cities like Perth and Brisbane again. So that will start to play out over the next 5 years and is as we speak. One of the cool things that I'm noticing, like our office is just on the beach at Caloundra, and we sort of shoot down there for a swim or a training session a few days a week. And what I've noticed is it's late January now at the time of recording this, and the beach is still absolutely packed with people. The restaurants, the cafes and bars are packed. Now, what I heard from the government is that, actually from CBA, is Aussie saved about $100 billion in extra household savings in 2020, and CBA is expecting that money to start trickling through the economy in 2022. So really interesting. On top of that, Aussies historically spend about $36 billion a year going on international travel. And instead of spending that on international travel, we're starting to see a domestic tourism boom, which is going to result in the tourism industries, retail industries, and hospitality industries coming back to their former glory, I think, by the end of 2021.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even if it's not the domestic tourism that soaks up the whole $36 billion, it's still residual cash that all of these households are going to have to spend on something. And what we're experiencing up here on the sunny coast right now is massive construction boom. You know, you talk to any tradie up here at the moment and they are flat chat at the moment. So maybe what a lot of these households are doing is spending their money on upgrading their family home, or maybe buying a new family home as well.
Yeah, and that's the other thing we're starting to notice with all of the first-time buyers grants, and this just isn't in Brisbane, this is in the big cities around Australia. We're seeing the first-time buyers grants and some of the incentives around building, and as well as some like small lifting in prices in certain suburbs, starting to push the bottom of the market. And when those people feel like they've made a little bit of money, they sell and they move to the middle, and then the middle moves to the top. And we're starting to see that. And they, you know, Ray Dalio and the Australian government talk about this regularly, just around, you know, pushing the economy up from the bottom rather than like re-stimulating it from the top down. So it's super exciting. In terms of the stuff that I'm noticing on the ground, I think last week we bought 3 properties. Hopefully when I walk in and look at my emails this morning, it's 4 or 5 from last week's inspections and client calls. But I noticed that properties were selling so quickly within 1 to 3 days. There were multiple offers on every single one of the properties that we bought that weren't off market last week, particularly in the CBD centre, close to the beach or close to the city on the north side and close to the city on the south side. There just seems to be this massive underlying demand at the moment, which is making it trickier and trickier to buy places at great prices.
It seems as though there's heaps of confidence out there as well, because people are coming in and throwing in massive offers well and truly over the asking price just to get properties under their control. And I think it's got a lot to do with the emotions of people that may not have the experience that we do, because they're coming in and they're searching for a property for weeks and weeks on end, and they keep losing out because properties are selling so quickly that, you know, a property will come up and they're like, screw it, I'm going $40,000 over the asking price because I'm just so emotionally fatigued from this.
You know, I've seen it back in 2015 to 2017 in Melbourne and Sydney. We saw it, you know, 10 years before that back in Perth as well. It's getting warmer, but you've got to remember that Brisbane's coming off the bottom of a 10-year low. That in many suburbs in Brisbane, prices, when you factor in inflation, are still cheaper than they were 10 years ago. So it's not Sydney and Melbourne that have gone through this crazy boom in the last 7 to 10 years. And because of that, we're super excited. So if you are an investor looking at Brisbane, here's a few tips and tricks based on our experience. 1, don't get emotional and don't get fatigued in this current market. There will always be another fish in the sea for you to find. And if you're patiently looking at one suburb for a few months, you will get the property you're after.
It's good to remember that property is a marathon, not a sprint. You don't need to be rushing in. You know, it's not going to be the end of the world if it takes you a couple of extra months to get into the market.
If you're an interstate investor, then you're only as strong as the team around you. So get a great property manager in place. Make sure when you buy, you are doing the right due diligence, town planning checks, building and pest inspections, getting builders or plumbers or electricians if required to check out places. Get your property manager to do a thorough inspection for you and pre-handover inspection as well, to make sure you put yourself in the safest possible position and you know what you're buying.
Another one is avoid looking at the entire Brisbane property market. make sure that you've developed your strategy and you're honing in on maybe 1 or 2 suburbs at best. You know, things to take into consideration is your borrowing capacity, how much you can afford. You really want to look at proximity to the CBD, and depending on your borrowing capacity, you ideally want to get as close to the city as you can afford, or within walking distance to the beaches ideally.
Yeah, they're the markets that have exploded in Sydney and Melbourne and LA and the big cities around the world. It's all about proximity, while Brisbane is still so cheap, and in many cases dirt cheap. Like, there's suburbs that we've been buying. I bought a place for a client last week. I think we paid $315,000. It's 20 k's in the city, 650 square metre block. We've got other clients looking within 5 to 7 k's of the city that we're looking to put offers on in the next month for $1 million. Like, there's such a variety close to the city in Brisbane. So figure out, as Simon said, what you can afford and go for it. It's really exciting. Like, we've been buying properties very actively for ourselves over the last few years. We'll continue to do that over the next few years to take advantage. We're so excited for you. We're so excited for Brisbane between now and 2025. We wish you all the best. Stay safe with your investments. And do you have anything else that you sort of wanted to give as a last minute tip?
Well, I think as though, you know, if people are out there thinking that they want to learn a little bit more about the Brisbane property market, they've got their deposit together, maybe just struggling to gain that confidence to jump into the market themselves, then, you know, we do help a very small number of people enter into the Brisbane property market every single month. And we do offer free strategy sessions, which you can jump over to our website, www.pumpedonproperty.com, to lock in one of those strategy sessions with either myself or Ben. You'll talk to us directly, and we'll be able to help you understand the market and maybe give you that confidence that you need, or even potentially help you.
What another crazy thing is that I just noticed, sorry, I just geek out on this stuff, but I went for a drive to check out a property that I'm renovating. We'll talk about in an upcoming video, as well as Simon's reno on the sunny coast. Now, what I noticed from driving around this suburb, which is about 10 k's from the city, and what I love about this suburb is the suburb's a little bit closer, 200, 300, 400 grand more expensive now. It kind of hasn't been discovered. And then I was just driving around the streets. It's the first time I've been there this year. And it was last year about 1 out of every 10 properties had been renoed. And then driving through it this time, it was like 1 out of every 3. I'm just watching stuff change around me now that people are stuck at home. One of our clients is the head of Bunnings Australia, and he's like, they've never had a bigger year in their history.
There you go.
It's just exploding with people renovating, adding value to their properties Australia-wide, but Brisbane has been one of the top performing markets for that. It's just really exciting to see that change hands-on on the ground.
Yeah, and I think just like, looking at 2020, and yeah, it was a crazy tough year for so many people, but, you know, now reflecting on that and looking at the opportunity that is presented with everyone having a little bit more cash in the bank, being able to, you know, create their dream home, or, you know, ideally do those things that they've had in the pipeline for a long time.
We wish you all the best, guys. Good luck, and enjoy the Brisbane market while it's still affordable.
Oh, sweaty, so sweaty.